Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, May the 21st, 2024. Today I want to talk about Iran with reference to the helicopter crash that happened, I think, in the northwest of the country, close to the Azeri border. And this crash was serious. It killed the president and also the foreign minister. We don't know what caused the accident or crash. It may not have been an accident, but I suppose helicopters are dangerous. I think there had been a bad weather warning, but it flew regardless. So, yeah, it could have been an accident. But nonetheless, it is a big deal. And in this video, I want to look at the horoscope of the deceased president, who is Ebrahim Raisi, and maybe if I've got time, I'll look at the horoscope of the foreign minister. But I want to consider this with reference to the Iranian chart, and also I want to consider the background of Ebrahim Raisi, the deceased Iranian president, because really he's a nasty piece of work, no doubt about that. He was in 1988 deputy prosecutor general in Tehran, and he was involved in the execution of between 2,500 and 33,000 political prisoners. I mean, they were sort of leftists in general, but that is a lot of people. Whether it's 2,500 people or 33,000 people, he was involved in it. And I think that there are links actually between his involvement in this round of executions. He was apparently a member of something they call his opponents call the Death Committee. And, I know he looks kind of nice and dignified in his photograph, but actually he's a monster. And I'm just thinking that maybe there's a linkage, and I think it actually is a real linkage between what was going on at the time when the execution started. I think the date normally given is July the 19th, 1988, in the early hours of the morning, and what was going on at the time of the helicopter accident. Now, I understand that in the past I've been a little bit ambivalent about Iran. Some people have been upset by my ambivalence. I do take the view that, the United States has caused a big mess through its past interventions in Iran, going back to the early 1950s, when the United States plus Britain helped bring down an elected government of Mossadegh. But nonetheless, in this instance, we cannot deny, whatever you think, that the president, he was completely ghastly. And yes, I will be looking at his horoscope. But before I look at Iran, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, May the 21st, 2024. So there, top right, that is the deceased president, Ebrahim Raisi, who I will be talking about very soon. And looking at the horoscope for today, it's a bit mixed, that horoscope, because I've got far too many points in it. I've gone and put a load of hypotheticals in there, which I don't really want to put a load of hypothetical planets in that chart. I don't want to confuse it, so I will make the chart a little bit simpler, like that. Okay. So we can see that the moon is most certainly in Scorpio. Doesn't matter where you are, the moon is in Scorpio. And so moon in Scorpio is a fairly emotional placement for the moon. There could be strong feelings. And I suppose that kind of clashes with the fact that we've now got the Sun in Gemini. So the Sun in Gemini and the Moon in Scorpio are two very different energies. The Sun in Gemini is about the mind, it's about thinking. It can be a bit trivial and superficial, whereas Moon in Scorpio is deep and emotional. And maybe this is going to be a running, I won't say an argument, but a running conflict over the course of the day, Gemini versus Scorpio. And the Moon is really in quite a difficult position in terms of placement, because it's in the Via Combusta, which is that rather dangerous part of the sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio. Plus, being in Scorpio, it's fallen. The Moon is exalted in Taurus, therefore it's fallen in Scorpio. And so, yes, there could be deep feelings, feelings which are difficult to express. And at the same time, because of the Via Combusta, things might happen which we just weren't expecting. We'd expected one thing to happen and something else happens, and perhaps it's completely confounds our planning. So if we've got rigid plans today, I think we need to be careful, because those plans may have to be adjusted at short notice. Now, this Moon in Scorpio is making a square to Pluto, so that sort of adds to the intensity. I mean, there's an association between the sign Scorpio and Pluto, I would have said. I'm certainly not going to say that Pluto rules Scorpio or anything like that, but I think that there is an association between Pluto and Scorpio. So when the Moon is square Pluto, things are going to be intense, and we might be holding on to things very tight, and we don't want to let go of them, and we might become a little obsessive. And the Moon is making an opposition aspect to Mercury, and that opposition between Moon and Mercury is about powerful feelings and the question of how we express powerful feelings. Indeed, is it possible to express powerful feelings? How do we bring our feelings over? Moon and Mercury are both the planets of communication. Moon is more about emotional communication. Mercury is more about mental, cerebral communication. But something could be held back. So it may be difficult for us to communicate as effectively as we would like. And while all this is going on, the Sun is making a semi-square to Mars. Now, that semi-square to Mars, Sun and Mars are 45 degrees apart, is potentially quite angry. You've got these two planets, male planets, quite ego-focused planets, making the semi-square. So that could create conflict. It could create a situation where we put too much energy into something, and as a result, we might cause an accident, or we might be involved in an accident. We need to be very careful when messing around with fire and electricity and explosives with Sun semi-square Mars, because things could get out of control very quickly if we're not careful. Turning to some of the midpoints, the Sun and Mars, because they're in semi-square, they both are hitting the same midpoints. And one midpoint that they're both hitting is the Neptune-Pluto midpoint. So with the Sun and Mars aspecting the Neptune-Pluto midpoint, then we may have access to high-level cosmic energy. Neptune and Pluto, these two planets, discovered planets, which are sort of out there. Pluto is a planet of transformation. Neptune is a planet of perhaps transcendence. And we do have access to some powerful forces, but we're not quite sure how to harness them. And so if we're planning on taking any dramatic initiatives today, we need to be careful. We have to ask ourselves, why are we doing it? What is motivating us? Because we may be being motivated by chaotic forces that we don't properly understand. And it's not just about us, it's about the world in general. So I'm not making any personal statement there. Turning to the heliocentric picture, always a good idea, as I say, to look at the solar system from a heliocentric perspective, to put the sun in the middle of the solar system. And the Earth is sextile Pluto. So with the Earth sextile Pluto, this is a time when we can create change. And because it's a sextile, it needn't take much to make things happen. So it's just important not to use too much energy. A little goes a long way with Earth sextile Pluto. And it may be that all it takes in order to set off a chain of events is just the desire. We want something to happen, and because we want something to happen, we're desirous of it happening, and we make our desires felt, and one thing leads to another, and it does start to happen. So we don't want to create too much of we don't want to create too much of an earthquake there. We don't have to put in too much energy. Just a little bit of energy does go a long way. Also, Mercury is square Venus and square Uranus. So they're heliocentrically Mercury in Aquarius, it's square Venus, and it is square Uranus. Now, geocentrically, you can never get Mercury square Venus, but heliocentrically, you can get all the aspects, because Venus and Mercury geocentrically, they seem to hug the sun, but from a heliocentric point of view, they don't. And so with Mercury square Venus square Uranus, I think it may be about the struggle to communicate something. We're struggling to bring our creativity out into the open, and it's hard work, and we may feel that the only way to be taken seriously is to do something dramatic. And matters are made even more dramatic by the fact that Mercury is on the Saturn-Pluto midpoint. So it may feel that, some of us, we have to put a huge amount of mental energy into something because we're really trying to make something happen. It's as if something is hemming us in, but we have to break through. And I think we can break through, but we have to remember it's Mercury. We have to use our ideas and our intelligence rather than brute force. And so that's the overall picture. Now, I should say that in terms of geocentric aspects, actually there isn't much going on. I've said that, we've got the moon in Scorpio, we've got moon square Pluto, moon opposition Mercury, sun semi-square Mars. Not a lot going on there. I think probably the most important aspect is that sun semi-square Mars. And I will be discussing that sun semi-square Mars when I look at what's going on for some of the 12 signs. So let us now turn to my forecast for the 12 signs. First of all, I will reset this to the geocentric system. Okay, that's done. Okay, these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, May the 21st, 2024. Aries, you want things to happen, and I think that there is a great sense of impatience here. And in some ways, you don't feel that you want to be bothered, but you know you have to be bothered. And so what's going to happen? How are you going to make it happen? Now, Mars, which is your ruler, is still conjunct the North Node. So Mars conjunct North Node. There are certainly things that you need to do, that you want to do, and it's going to be important to take the initiative. But Mars is semi-square the Sun. And so with Mars semi-square Sun, there is a danger that you're just a little bit too hasty. You could rush into things, maybe not just through actions, but also perhaps through your words. You say things which are dramatic. You're trying to move things on. You're perhaps trying to create a bit of tension. If you create some tension, then people will respond to that tension, and then you will get your action. But action for the sake of action is probably not a good idea, and you do have to think through the consequences. And yes, I do understand that you do have limited patience, but you need to make full use of your strengths. Because at the moment, Aries, I actually think that you're quite sensitive. You know, your sensitivity could have a negative manifestation, like getting annoyed quickly. But a positive manifestation of your sensitivity could be just feeling what people are experiencing, just knowing what's going on in people's heads and also in their hearts. And I think that if you handle things right, that should be able to really guide you and allow you to make the right decisions. So do listen to your feelings. It might be annoying just holding back, being patient, allowing your emotions to really settle and to understand what's going on. But I think that's so important, because if you were to do the absolute first thing that came into your head, then that could cause problems. And also, Aries, you may be influenced by things that you don't properly understand. You know, you might decide that something is important, but not really knowing why you think it's important. And perhaps you're being distracted by some collective energy, or perhaps it's a group, or the collective unconscious. It's pulling you in a particular direction. And in the process, you could actually lose your individuality. I mean, things happen in crowds and in groups which can often be unfortunate. And it's so important, Aries, that you're able to think for yourself. And that's what it's all about today, making your own decisions. You have to decide what's right, and you have to use a certain amount of logic there. And if you just follow your heart, then I think you could get yourself into trouble. So be independent. And remember, Sun is in Gemini. Sun is in Gemini. It's quite a logical and communicative placement. And so, yeah, try to be logical, Gemini. Try to be logical, Aries. And then you will be able to act correctly. Taurus, you are somewhat concerned about other people. I mean, you know that other people are important and that other people can't really be avoided. But at the same time, you don't want to be in a position where you feel completely overwhelmed. Though you've then got this question of how do you protect your boundaries? And today there is this opposition between the Moon and Mercury. And this Moon opposition Mercury, crosses the main axis of your chart. You've got the Moon in Scorpio, which is your opposite sign, and you've got Mercury in Taurus, which is, of course, your sign. So that Moon opposition Mercury, may indicate to you that you and someone else have very different opinions. There are certain subjects on which you really don't see eye to eye. And things could get difficult, perhaps because you and the other person are being incredibly stubborn. And there doesn't seem to be any common ground. And so what do you do? I think perhaps you need to reimagine the situation. So if you're in a situation where there is apparently no possibility of compromise, where you just feel you're dealing with someone who's completely different from you, then somehow the situation has to be transformed. After all, we had a square between Mercury and Pluto quite recently. We've got a square between the Moon and Pluto as well. So that Pluto is the principle of transformation. So all of that energy which is locked into a conflict needs in some way to be transformed. And that energy has to move. And the question is, how do you move that energy? Well, the other person is a law unto themselves. You can't make them do anything. But perhaps you can give a little bit of ground. You don't have to give a lot of ground, but just a small apparent compromise on your part can really make a big difference. And that can be the thing that really is able to move things. And that's especially the case if you're in a relationship which is important, but which maybe isn't working as well as it should be working. Perhaps I think that you can make a bit of a change through making a small compromise, and I think that that could make a very big difference. And I think that you yourself, Taurus, are capable of creating surprises, and you don't have to do things in the normal way. You can break your pattern. Perhaps people have got used to you working in a particular way, responding in a particular way. I mean, after all, Taurus is quite a reliable sign. And then suddenly something changes. You decide to do things differently. And just a small change can make a huge difference. And in that way, Taurus, you can actually have quite a revolutionary impact. And it's just all about defying expectations. People have expectations. That's the way people work. People very rarely see other people as individuals, even if they know them very well. They assume that people run according to a script. And if you break that script, do something which is not on the script, then everything can change. And perhaps that is the way to really express yourself and get things to move. And it's also a way to actually understand what someone is like and what they really think about you. Because if they are respectful of you and appreciate you as an individual, they won't mind too much if you do things differently. But if they make a real fuss if you do something differently, then maybe that's a sign that this person is not being very useful. So, Taurus, it could be an interesting day. I think you have kind of got your work cut out from a relationship perspective. So, yeah, if you are involved in one-to-one relationships, you've got to work out how to create some flow, because it does seem that a few things are stuck, and perhaps the best way to create some flow is to give a little bit of ground. You don't have to give a lot of ground, just a bit of ground. It could make a big difference. Gemini, you do find at the moment that you want things done in a particular way, and that's not really a very typically Gemini way of being. I mean, Geminis like variety, very important. But at the moment, Gemini, you're perhaps still getting used to the sun being in your sign. It's fun having the sun in Gemini, but you're still a little bit uncomfortable with it. And you're getting a bit, it takes you time to get used to it. And at the moment, it seems that you would like things done in a particular way. And you're not being an entirely typical Gemini. And you do value consistency. And so if people want to change their plans, you might surprisingly not take to it very well. And it just may be that you are in a particular place and you're comfortable in that place, and you can see the challenges from outside are coming up now. That you are being asked to move on, and you don't really like that. You would prefer to just stay where you are, but I think it is time to move on. At least in terms of not being stuck in just one state of mind, and just moving into a state of mind which is more exciting, more interesting, and opens you up to new experiences. And from a heliocentric point of view, I mentioned that Mercury is square Venus. So Mercury is, of course, your ruler, and it's square Venus. So what's that about? I think that many Geminis are perhaps struggling to do something that they're really proud of. You want to do something special that's perhaps of creative significance. It really shows off your creativity and your cleverness. But it's tough. It's not easy. And you feel that there are just a lot of obstacles. And maybe what you need to do is not be in so much of a hurry. If you want to do something that's genuinely valuable, you have to accept that it is going to take a bit of time and also preparation. You've got to make sure that all of the details are in order, and that could be somewhat annoying. And you perhaps, I think, you were expecting something to be easy and you didn't want to put in the effort, and now you realize you do have to put in the effort, and you don't want to do it, and you're being quite stubborn about it, but you've just got to finish something off. You've got to perhaps be mature, realize that you're working on something that's not perfect and but just needs that little bit more effort. And so in that sense, in Gemini, it's very important not to be lazy. Though I don't think there's any reason why you should be lazy today. After all, Mercury is conjunct the Sun-Mars midpoint. And, that is really quite a big deal, being, conjunct the Sun-Mars midpoint. I mean, it's like the Sun and Mars as a pair are really energetic. And so with Mercury on a Sun-Mars midpoint, you can really make things happen. If you just really put in the effort, it's like you're going to be able to bring to bear these resources. Some of these resources may actually be quite emotional. You bring them to bear, and ideally you just focus on one thing. Remember, Mercury is in Taurus, and Taurus is a fixed sign, and it's capable of great focus. And so from the depths of your personality, you focus on something you really want. And with that Mercury on a Sun-Mars midpoint, you can almost be like a laser beam, just focusing your entire being on an end result that you want. And if you're not distracted, I think that you may very soon start to get real results. Cancer. The moon is your ruler, and the moon is in Scorpio all day long. And I think this moon in Scorpio in some ways, it's a good thing, because Cancer, you are obviously a water sign, and so Scorpio is a water sign. So with the moon in Scorpio, you very much feel in your element. You work best in an emotional environment because you can deal with emotional complications. You can deal with other people's feelings, and with the moon in Scorpio, you're comfortable with the emotional situation. But there could be irritants. For example, the moon is making an opposition to Mercury, and Mercury is in Taurus, and Mercury is in a part of your chart which is quite sociable. And I think that today's Cancer, you might come across people who are really quite annoying. They're sort of upsetting your equilibrium. You'd like to be able to do things your own way, at your own pace, but then, your equilibrium is being upset, and you can't do everything you'd like to do at your own pace. And so, Cancer, you might get angry. There's a real possibility there. With that moon opposition Mercury, some Cancerians may say things which are quite upsetting, and which you might just lash out with your words without really thinking it through. It may just come from your unconscious. Just you say something, and once you said it, you start to see the response. So do monitor the way you respond to other people. And if you start getting angry, you should work out what's going on. It just may be that you're getting angry about something that really you shouldn't be getting angry about, and your anger could actually be very disruptive. So in that situation, it may be best if you try to focus on what's important to you. And if you really find that you can't deal with people, then maybe you shouldn't. Enjoy your own space. Do what's important to you. Create what's important to you, because creating is going to really matter today. And I do think right now that you are very creative, and I think you can bring to bear your feelings and really create something of real value out of your emotions. It's like you start with your emotions, which is something vague, invisible, but when you focus on your emotions, you can actually start to see your emotions manifest. And provided your concentration isn't disturbed by annoying elements, then you can actually start to create some very real results for yourself. Leo. The Sun is a semi-square Mars, and so the Sun is your ruler, and Mars is the planet of assertion, perhaps arguments, and this Sun-Mars semi-square can increase your anger and annoyance levels if things don't completely go to plan. And so I think it's just important that you try to avoid situations which make you angry. So if in the past you've been to places which have made you angry, if you've been in contact with people who've made you angry, then perhaps you should just avoid them, because you have to ask, do you actually need to get angry? Is it really important? Though it can't be denied that you do have a lot of energy at your disposal. You're almost being propelled. But the question is, what is propelling you? Is it sheer ambition? Or is it something else? Is it some cosmic energy that is demanding some kind of action, and it doesn't care who takes the action? You've just got caught up with this energy. Maybe the cosmos is telling you to do something. No, you have to ask yourself what's going on. You're not the only person who's picking up on this energy. Probably a lot of other people are. And it may not be healthy. You may be pushed into doing something which isn't really in your own interests. And this is especially the case if you're getting angry or overambitious, and you're being influenced by things that you don't properly understand. Because in extreme cases, you could start doing things which could turn out to be really quite self-destructive. So, Leo, I really do think that a bit of self-discipline is required here. And I think that when dealing with other people, whether they're sort of old friends or new people you've just met, do consider the influence that they are having on you. Because other people, in some respects, are sort of messengers from the cosmos, and they're part of the crowd, and they're trying to push you in a particular direction. And you have to hold firm. It's nice to have people around you, but if these people are pushing you in the wrong direction, then that is not really healthy. And so, Leo, it's just important that you understand the pressures that are acting on you, because some of these pressures may not be entirely healthy. And you really mustn't forget your own core grounding. Grounding is really important today. You need to make sure that everything is secure, that you've always got somewhere to go to, and also that, you're making your own decisions in your own way, and no one is hurrying you. And if that's the case, then I think it'll be fine. What you don't want to do is be in a situation where you find that other people are calling the shots, that you feel that someone else is being the leader and you feel you have no choice but to follow. I think that could be a recipe for disaster. But really, Leo, you should not underestimate your own strength. After all, from a heliocentric perspective at the moment, the Sun is sextile Pluto. The Earth is sextile Pluto. Now you might say, well, so what? How does that affect you? I mean, the Earth. What does the Earth mean to Leo? Well, the corollary of the Earth sextiling Pluto is the Sun trining Pluto. Now, the Sun doesn't trine Pluto today, but the Sun is starting to make that trine to Pluto. That trine to Pluto is going to be exact tomorrow, but you can still feel its influence. And with that Sun trine Pluto, I think you are put in a position where you can, if you want, bring to bear an enormous amount of power. You may not be aware of it, but once you actually start trying to make things happen, then I think that your power will be absolutely apparent. And I think that you'll be able to get your way. And I think that once you start getting your way in one area, you're going to start getting your way in another area as well. And provided your goals are healthy and are life-affirming, then that's a situation that should be entirely fortunate. Virgo, you do have quite a lot to say. I think you're actually very good at saying things and pointing things out. I think your observations today could be really very accurate. and you just may notice things that just other people completely miss. But in the process of noticing things, you have to consider the reaction you get, because what we've got here is an opposition aspect between the moon and Mercury. Remember, Mercury is your ruler, and with that opposition between the moon and Mercury, there's some chance that you say things which are unwise, and you could say things, for example, which cause offense. And once you start saying things and once you start getting a response, it's very easy to get yourself into some kind of argument, just an argument that just keeps going on, and no one's prepared to move, there's no compromise, and it just becomes a deadlock. Though, if I had to choose a winner, is it going to be you or someone else? If you are in a conflict situation, you possibly do have a slight advantage. After all, Mercury is your ruler, and Mercury is currently conjunct the Sun-Mars midpoint. So Sun and Mars are a very energetic pair. They can make things happen. And so with Mercury on the Sun-Mars midpoint, that really does indicate that you can be really powerful and you can really make things happen. And therefore, Virgo, you need to ask yourself why. It's always important to ask why. Why do you want to make things happen? What actually are you trying to achieve? Because it's true that you can assert yourself, that you can get people to do things your way, and that's nice. But you do have to have a larger plan. It all has to be within a context. So I think, Virgo, it's going to be very important that you think carefully about what you are trying to achieve and how much energy you want to put in. Because, from a heliocentric point of view, Mercury is conjunct the Saturn-Pluto midpoint. And so with Mercury conjunct the Saturn-Pluto midpoint, you can indeed bring to bear the force of the cosmos as a way of getting results and breaking things down. Yeah, you can break things today. There may have been structures that have been holding things in for a long time, and you could take the view that those structures have become obsolete and you just want to roll over them. But once you break something, it's difficult to put it back. It's difficult to fix it. Once you've challenged a person or an institution and you've made your feelings clear, that's not something you can take back. So don't get involved in a conflict situation unless you've got the resources to see it through. But, that doesn't take away from the fact that right now, Virgo, you are in a strong position. Libra, you're an individual, no doubt about it. And I think that your individuality is intensified by the fact that Venus, which is your ruler, is making a conjunction to the Sun-Uranus midpoint. So if you look at the Sun-Uranus midpoint as a pair, it's really very willful. Sun-Uranus as a pair has a very clear idea about where it wants to go and what it wants to achieve, and it's quite stubborn about it, and it's certainly prepared to cause a fuss, and it doesn't like being told. And that means that with Venus on the Sun-Uranus midpoint, you have a clear sense of what you want, and you're prepared to cause trouble if anyone gets in your way. And I know that normally Librans are supposed to be very reasonable people. They don't like to upset the apple cart. But maybe a certain unreasonable streak is making itself felt at the moment. And you're just not really happy to just go along with the crowd. I think that's actually a good thing, but it's just important that you're aware of the consequences, and also the consequences on particular individuals. People are going to respond to you for better or for worse, and we can't avoid the fact that the Sun is making a semi-square to Mars. So Mars rules Aries. Aries is the sign opposite Libra. So with Sun semi-square Mars, that may describe some of the people you have to deal with today. There are people who are just as independent-minded as you are. There are people who want their way, and they don't want to be contradicted. And that could mean, Libra, that you get yourself into some kind of an argument or a conflict or a deadlock. And it's possible that one sticking point could be money. That is a possibility. After all, the moon is making an opposition to Mercury, and the moon is in Scorpio. And so I think there's a real chance that you and someone else, or I suppose it could be an institution or a bank or something like that, have different ideas about the way money should be spent or saved, or how income should be handled, and whether or not you should make an effort to increase your income. These kind of financial issues could be a problem if you're not careful, and they could lead to a bit of a deadlock situation. And so maybe, Libra, when you're talking to people over the course of the day, perhaps the issue of money should be avoided. Okay, it may have to be discussed tomorrow or the day after, but maybe today you should just leave it alone. Scorpio. The moon is very much in your sign at the moment. And I think, Scorpio, in many cases, that means that you're going to feel that you are in control. That you control the vertical, you control the horizontal. And it's because of your emotional awareness. I think emotionally, yes, you will be very aware. You're going to be understanding what people are feeling, what makes people tick, and you will also understand their weaknesses. But just because you understand someone doesn't mean that you're in complete control, and doesn't mean that you won't be challenged. And I think there could certainly be challenges today, because the moon in Scorpio is making an opposition to Mercury. And that moon opposition Mercury is across, it's hitting the main axis of your chart. Moon in Scorpio, Mercury in Taurus. And that indicates to me that you and someone else may have a difference of opinion, and the more you and this other person talk to each other, the more I think it will become clear that there is a difference of opinion. And it may be healthy. It may be you need to actually accept that you and someone else don't agree. And, when you have expressed your thoughts and they have expressed their thoughts, it will be quite clear that they don't match up, that they do not occupy the same space, and that something has to give. And you therefore have to consider what is the right approach. I think there is a danger that you are too stubborn, that you aren't really able to contemplate change. You might take the view that if you contemplate a change, it will be a sign of weakness. The problem is that the person on the other end may have a similar approach. No one wants to give something away. No one wants to appear weak. So maybe you need a third party to resolve the matter, or maybe you need a sudden event that comes from nowhere, which may not, I don't think it's not a bad event, but just an event that changes the focus. And perhaps once you and another person can change your focus, that means that you can start to see a disagreement in a different light. And that may be the beginning of the possibility of some kind of compromise. And in a general sense, you have to possibly be careful about who you talk to, because Moon opposition Mercury is very verbal, but it's not verbal necessarily in a comfortable way. So if you try talking to someone, you might be misunderstood, or you might find that someone resents the fact that you're trying to talk to them. Maybe they just don't want to be disturbed. But it works both ways. I think if someone tries to talk to you, you may also take the view that you don't want to be disturbed. You just want to be in your space. But I don't think that would be the right approach. I think you do need to really consider the impact that other people have on you. And it's better that someone tells you what's on their mind rather than keeps it secret. Now, if someone tells you what's on their mind, you may really react badly to it, but you shouldn't react too badly, because you're just being told the truth. Someone's actually could be very honest with you. And honesty should be regarded as a virtue. And so if you do find that someone is being honest with you, then you should respect that and you should appreciate it, even if you don't like what you're hearing. Because that honesty is going to clear the air. And it could, it could lead to an argument, but that's not the right approach. I think that it's perhaps the beginning of a new accommodation. It all starts with honesty. And maybe if someone's being honest with you, you can reciprocate by being honest with them. And then you can see what happens. Sagittarius, you are quite friendly today. I think more friendly than yesterday. I think that you want people to be happy and you try your hardest, but it's not always easy, is it? I think you do have a certain inclination at the moment to just fall back, to just be an observer rather than an actor. It just feels more comfortable. And the advantage of that is that you don't have to take risks. I mean, one risk, is like falling out with people. That is a big risk, falling out with people. It could happen. And if you have to engage with people, people who you like to have around, who you enjoy their company, but if you engage with people today, disagreements may come to the surface. And so maybe what we should say is that if someone is important to you and you're trying to cultivate their friendship, perhaps today you should actually stay out of their way, because you don't really have anything useful to say. I mean, you've got lots of things to say, no doubt about that, but I'm not convinced that you've got anything useful to say. And you might just be concentrating on the wrong thing, or perhaps the wrong details, and it could all become rather messy. And instead, by just being yourself, you can get yourself together and you won't be taking any risks. But still, I suppose in a general sense, there is something about you that is quite friendly. After all, Venus is starting to move towards a conjunction with Jupiter. We can't ignore that. Okay, that conjunction between Venus and Jupiter is going to get closer. It's not as close as it will get, but it's there. And so with Venus conjunct Jupiter, there's at least one person who you can get close to, and one person who you're not going to offend, who you're going to know how to respond to. And it's just important that you're able to find that person and to see, who is close to you, who is around you, who is talking to you, who is trying to relate to you. And that one person could do you the world of good. And I should also say that Jupiter is a universal signature of good luck. So if Venus is moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter, then overall your luck is starting to improve as that conjunction becomes exact. Okay, the conjunction is not exact today, but it will be pretty much exact tomorrow, and I think the day after. I'm not quite sure when is the day. It's not exact today, but it will be exact very soon. And you're already starting to feel its effects in a big way. And so if something can go right, I think it will go right, provided you're properly prepared and there's not too much clutter around you. I think you've got to be very organized to take advantage of the good luck coming your way. And, I'm always wary about telling people about good luck, because as soon as you tell people about good luck, they start planning for it. And you get the lust for result, as Aleister Crowley called it, the lust for result. He says that if you're doing a magical operation, it's the lust for result that can always kill it. You want something so badly, you just don't get it. That's a problem with positive thinking. I'm not actually a fan of positive thinking. You just have to relax about it and not think about what could go right. Be negative, give up. That's the best way. But can't deny it, Venus is moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter. And yes, if you handle it correctly, that can bring something very fortunate your way. So, in that sense, you've got the two benefics. Remember, that is it. Venus and Jupiter are both fortunate planets. So Jupiter benefits from Venus, Venus benefits from Jupiter. And so I think you can really be helped by Venus. And it may be the case, Sagittarius, that one particular person is going to be very lucky for you. Capricorn, you are perhaps thinking that you should be making a little bit of an effort in terms of your social life. In the past, you perhaps wanted to keep your distance, but maybe right now, Capricorn, you do feel that your social life is important or should be important, and so you're making a bit of an effort. But it's still hard work. After all, the moon is making an opposition to Mercury. The moon in the Capricorn chart represents the other person. And so if you imagine moon opposition Mercury, it could be someone with fixed ideas. It could be someone who talks too much. It could be someone who's got the wrong ideas. And so some of the people you have to deal with today may not be entirely to your liking. So sure, you could try to have an active social life, and that might work out, but it could so easily not work out, and you might sort of be confirmed in your own pessimism by some of the people you meet. So don't have too many expectations in terms of other people. And it's probably not a good idea to make any special effort to get on with someone. It just might be a waste of time. But it's a temporary situation, though. I just feel that yes, other people can't be ignored, but at the end of the day, you just shouldn't have any expectations. And I think that it may become clear that you and certain other people have completely different views of the world, which really can't be reconciled. And if you have a completely different approach to someone, a completely different view of the world, then trying to interact with them may ultimately be a bit of a waste of time. And instead, Capricorn, it may be time to focus on what's important to you. In terms, perhaps, of how you imagine the future. Think about the future. The future is not just about money and status. It's about something else. It's perhaps about a quality of life, a quality of existence, a quality of life and existence that right now actually you feel that you're missing. And when you interact with other people, I've already talked about perhaps some unsatisfactory interactions with other people. When you interact with other people and you discover about things about other people's lives and priorities, that can sort of emphasize the point that it's very difficult to get the right priorities. When you hear people talk about their hopes of the future, and you might actually despair. You might be thinking, why do these people want this for the future? What kind of future do they imagine for themselves? And it may just seem really grim, but as I said, it's a passing situation, and I don't think you should worry too much about it. And perhaps you should focus instead on the positives for the day. And the real positive for today, and also for tomorrow and the day after, is that Venus is moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter in Taurus. And Taurus is a sign that responds very well to Capricorn, because Taurus and Capricorn, they're both air signs. And so with Venus and Jupiter making a conjunction with each other, we could see Venus as being, okay, Venus could be one other person. So it's just important that you don't entirely give up on humanity today. You might feel you made an effort, but it just didn't work. There's one person at least who's worth bothering with, who could make you feel better about yourself and your environment and the world in general. And Venus might also say something about what's happening at work. If you are working, I don't know what you're doing, maybe you're retired, but if you are working, or if you're doing anything to do with business, or maybe you're involved in a non-profit or some organization you happen to be working with, I think there may be some good news coming up. There may be an opportunity that just didn't exist before. And over the next couple of days, as Venus moves towards a conjunction with Jupiter, this opportunity might crystallize. Aquarius. I mentioned yesterday that you're starting to feel the germ of a bit of an ambition, I think. And I think that today your ambitions are starting to crystallize. You are starting to think about what you want. I mean, after all, the moon is in Scorpio, and the moon in Scorpio is a placement which is very much about desire, considering what you want. And there are certainly things you want, and I suppose you want them as soon as possible, but you are prepared to wait, and there is a certain amount of patience there, and you then have to work out how you are going to leverage your desires, bearing in mind that the moon is making an opposition to Mercury. So with this moon opposition to Mercury, there could be something getting in the way of you achieving what you want to achieve. Now, from a psychological point of view, it may be just your own sort of internal chatter. That could be the Mercury in Taurus, just chattering about stuff, your inner voice telling you that, well, this isn't possible, that maybe it's just all a waste of time, that there's no point. You could think about all the things that could go wrong. And from this internal chatter might actually become real chatter. So talking to people about your desires may seem a reasonable thing to do. I mean, if you've got something on your mind, good idea to talk about it. But in this case, I think talking to people may actually not help. It's very often the case, isn't it, when you've got a good idea, but you haven't fully, it's not fully formed, and you talk to someone about this half-formed idea, and you just get immediate negativity, and you then never take the time to allow this idea to develop. So if you've got an idea, and it's about your ambitions, where you want to go to, and you start talking about this idea, then the feedback you get may be worse than useless. I mean, in extreme cases, the feedback could be so problematic that you kind of give up on an important ambition. So maybe, Aquarius, you should have your ambitions, but in the first instance, you should perhaps keep them to yourself. I mean, just for a moment. I mean, not forever. And I don't think you'll be helped also by the attitude of other people. Other people have their own motivations, which don't make immediate sense. I mean, they seem to be, the people around you do seem to have a lot of energy. They seem to be in the mood for taking action. But at the same time, the actions they're thinking about may not seem particularly sensible. And so if you get very close to certain people, you may find that their influence is just not very helpful and that they're quite disruptive. So maybe you need to, keep things to yourself and not get too close to anyone, particularly in terms of your desires and work, career, your plans. Yeah, try not to get too close to people because, they could spoil things. Pisces, you have to decide, I suppose, Pisces, what is important. I mean, you've got a couple of ideas about where you want to pursue things, what your next, what the next stage is, and some of your ideas are quite fantastic. I mean, by fantastic, I suppose I'm saying there might be a tinge of fantasy there. May not be entirely realistic, at least not in their raw form, but it's certainly worth working on. But you've got to consider which ideas are worth pursuing and which ideas are just plain garbage. So you do have to make some decisions there. And in the process, don't take yourself too seriously. There is a danger that you get caught up with a particular set of ideas and you think this is what matters, and this is it, and I'm not going to change my ideas, and it's important to me. But it can be all, it is that sense of this is important. And we run into something and we think this is it. And in fact, it may not be important at all. We just feel it's important temporarily. So don't be fooled by thinking that something you come across today is really important when it actually is just a one-day wonder, just something that disappears very quickly. Though I think, Pisces, you can benefit from other people's conviction. There are certain people who are going to have a lot of power and a lot of energy, and they're going to be very convinced that one particular course of action is correct. And I think that you should try to use this energy. You can't be expected to make things happen all on your own. And by getting close to people who are high energy, I think that you can pick up on this energy, and I certainly think that can be a bonus. But you have to pick and choose. Some people have energy which is just too much, it's overwhelming, and they zoom off in the wrong direction. But there are other people who are very focused, who have clear ideas about where things should be going, and you have to decide firstly whether their ideas fit with your ideas, or is their view of the world completely incompatible with your own. But even if you meet someone who appears to be completely different from you, totally different ideas, almost having ideas that clash, that doesn't mean to say that you should just not get involved. Sometimes you need some dynamic tension. And today there is this moon conjunction, this opposition between the moon and Mercury. And I think this moon-Mercury opposition could be destructive, but at the same time it could be useful, because by getting involved in an argument, you can actually start to see what works and what doesn't. Because I think it could be an argument, but could be very constructive, that allows you to look at your own beliefs in a new light, and you might then realize that it's time to change some of your beliefs. And by changing some of your beliefs, you may give yourself a real sense of inner freedom. And that's it with the 12 signs. And I now want to look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 10, which is treading. Treading, remember, is the image of a tiger. I like to think of it, I like to think of it like you walk out into the corridor and there is a huge Siberian tiger. It's just lying there. And when you're confronted with this Siberian tiger just lying there, you can't just ignore it. You have to walk past it, and you must try to avoid treading on its tail, because if you tread on its tail, well, it might bite you. But maybe that's just an occupational hazard. Even if it does bite you, the I Ching says it's not necessarily the end of the world. It's not necessarily a misfortune if a tiger bites you. It strikes me as being pretty unfortunate, but it's a situation where we have to be really careful. It's a delicate situation, and there's plenty of opportunities for things to go really badly wrong if we're not careful how we tread, hence treading. And if we're in a new situation, we may have no choice. We may tread clumsily because we don't know any better. So that is a real possibility. Now, there is a moving line in this hexagram, and it is the second from a bottom line moves. And this is actually a very fortunate line. It talks about us being on a road that is flat and it's easy to negotiate. So this seems to be a situation where we do have a difficult obstacle to deal with, but we're fortunate. We know what to do. It seems that the road in front of us, or perhaps the floorboards on the corridor, are stable. Maybe we're not going to wake the tiger up by treading too hard and having a creaking floorboard. Everything will be silent and easy. And I think what the I Ching says is that it's to do with our approach. I think that our approach is going to be cautious, and we're going to understand what we can do and what we can't do, because in every situation that we have our limits. Those limits are physical. They're also created by our own destiny. Our destiny creates possibilities at particular times. If we try to do something which is not part of our destiny, then we're going to fail. But we're going to be acting within the limits of our destiny. And so as we walk past this tiger, we will understand the limits of our destiny, and then we're not going to make mistakes. And so it does seem that we're going to be able to get through a very sort of a difficult patch. It's a difficult situation. It seems that we're going to be able to do the right thing. And this moves us to another hexagram. And that moves us to hexagram 25, which is innocence. So having got through this obstacle, I think we can be very pleased with ourselves, and we can expect something good to happen. Or rather, we should not expect something good to happen, because hexagram 25 is about innocence. We're not expecting anything, but something good is about to happen. And maybe if we try to link this with the astrology, we shouldn't forget that there is a conjunction between the Venus and Jupiter coming up over the next couple of days. And maybe that is good luck coming our way. And as I said to one of the 12 signs, don't expect anything. Don't have any expectations. And I think that I talked about Aleister Crowley, because Aleister Crowley, the sort of early 20th century magician who obviously wrote tons of books about magic, and he said that what kills magic is the lust for result. We should not have the lust for result. We should expect nothing, because what kills things is expectation. And so with 25, it's about innocence. We assume nothing will happen. And because we assume nothing will happen, we do create the possibility of something actually happening in the real world. And of course, I'm talking about something that is fortunate, I think. I mean, I say that because there is this certain implication with this hexagram 25 that something unusual, unexpected might happen that maybe we weren't ready for. But I think this hexagram 25 is talking about a fortunate result. But if we want that fortunate result, we must make sure we have the right state of mind. And that is a state of mind of innocence. And that just means expecting nothing. And by expecting nothing, we increase our chances of getting the result that really deep down that we are looking for. And that's the I Ching. And now I want to turn my attention to Iran, and it's all a bit chaotic. Having to work out what's going on in Iran and me saying anything useful about Iran. But let's start off by looking at this helicopter accident. So what happened was that I think that the president of Iran and the foreign minister, they were meeting some people in Azerbaijan or on the border. There was some project between Iran and the Azeri government. That's right. I think that someone who is from Azerbaijan is called an Azeri. I think I've got that right. And so there was this meeting, and they were using a helicopter, and the helicopter crashed in woods, and it was cold, and there was a lot of fog. And according to Wikipedia, the accident happened. When did it happen? It happened at 1:30 in the afternoon on May the 19th, 2024. And we have got a midheaven of, it's not particularly easy to see on this chart. I mean, what's happening with this software is because you've got 5 planets in one sign, it's sort of messing up with the structure. It's messing up with the structure of the chart, which is a bit of a problem. But the midheaven is at 118 Gemini. So that means that there's a sun. The sun was about to go into Gemini. So we had Sun and Jupiter very close to the midheaven when this happened. And that's a reminder that the Sun-Jupiter conjunction is not necessarily fortunate. Sun-Jupiter, something happened, something exploded. Something had to give. And this Sun-Jupiter conjunction was really close at the time of the accident. I think it was certainly less than half a degree, and it was made stronger by the fact that it was on the midheaven, assuming at 1:30 in the afternoon is the time it happened. Now, by the way, one thing about this chart, you will see that I have put Tehran here. Now, this is not set for Tehran. It's just that I've got the coordinates of the accident site correct, but I had to sort of put in Tehran first to get the correct time zone, and having done that, I changed the coordinates because the place of the crash wasn't on the list of places in the software. So I haven't set this for Tehran. Don't worry. And so I think it on the surface it does seem to be about the Sun and Jupiter. I did wonder whether this chart it did in any way affect the horoscope of Iran. You would have thought it should affect the horoscope of Iran. I mean, Iran has just lost its president and its foreign minister. I mean, surely that is a big deal for any country. You would have thought that would show up in the country's horoscope. And so I did set up the chart for the Islamic Republic of Iran, which April the 1st, 1979, and this is a chart for the transits of the accident. It wasn't really very impressive. So the Islamic Republic of Iran has got a sun in Aries. So there is its sun at 11:06 Aries. After all, it was born in 1979 on April Fool's Day. And the moon at the time of the accident was exactly opposition the sun. And really, that is the main transit. and just moon opposition the sun. It's a very short-lived aspect, but when that aspect was exact, we got the accident. And so I didn't want to look too deeply into this chart because I wasn't really getting anywhere. It didn't seem to really configure much with the Iran chart. Looking at the solar return, Iran's solar return, I was just wondering, did it come up in the solar return? So here's the solar return for Iran. It's set for March the 31st, 2024, and again, I didn't really see anything too dramatic here. There's the sun at 11 Aries, so I wasn't particularly impressed by that chart. So I have to consider the president. I mean, the president, he's the head of state. And so the head of state, the president, he is the country. Although I understand Iran is complicated because you've got the supreme leader as well. I mean, I don't quite know who is the person who really controls the country. Maybe it's the supreme leader. But here is the man, the president. Ebrahim Raisi, born December the 14th, 1960. Don't know his time of birth. So it's a noon chart. He's a Sagittarius. Now, Sagittarius, we should never forget that Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. And Jupiter is a planet which can be quite doctrinaire. Sagittarians have ideas about what is good and what is right and what is wrong. And they can actually find it very difficult to compromise. And if something is wrong, then you need to do something about it. And we shouldn't forget that this man in the 1980s was part of the death committee in 1988, which was responsible for between 2,500 and 33,000 people being executed, political prisoners. And his association with death is seen by the fact that he has a Mars-Saturn opposition. Now, Mars-Saturn oppositions can work in many different ways. Mars-Saturn oppositions can be about someone who has got a lot of frustration and they show this frustration in a very healthy way, perhaps through drumming or through martial arts. That can be how it works. It can be someone who works really hard. Maybe Ebrahim Raisi did work really hard, but we mustn't forget 1988, he was responsible for killing all those political prisoners when he was Deputy Prosecutor General in Tehran and being part of this death committee. And yes, he had this Mars-Saturn opposition. And we don't know where his moon is. So his moon could be in Scorpio, could be in Libra. I don't know. I don't know which is which. Now we also need to consider where he was in the Jupiter-Saturn cycle. He was born close to a Jupiter-Saturn cycle. So he was born on this new cycle. So there was, then at the end of this cycle, sort of 1981, was when the revolution took off, when you had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, I suppose when he was about 20, when Iran became a theocracy. I mean, although it was 1979 that the Ayatollah took power. So I do find myself being very interested in the executions. I think that's the important point. I just think it's really matters that this man was involved in so many executions. They were quite brutal. I mean, executions are brutal, but you know, it was reading about political prisoners being, you know, put in, I think, in cages and taken off in groups of 6 by, you know, have half a dozen, and they would be hanged by cranes. I mean, this is not nice. And it all started, these executions. Apparently, the beginning was July the 19th, 1988. So July the 19th, 1888 was when the execution started in Tehran. And there was a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Early morning, the early hours of July the 19th, 1988. I mean, I've gone for midnight, so probably it was a couple of hours later. And this is when political prisoners in Tehran, and I think it happened in other cities, were separated out in preparation for them being executed. And the executions lasted over a period of a few months. And so, yeah, so this is when it all started. And there you have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And you will notice that Jupiter is at 29-27 Taurus. Well, I thought that's interesting. That rings a bell. Jupiter is pretty much a 29 Taurus right now. So there is a bit of an echo here in terms of Ebrahim Raisi dying close to the time of Jupiter being at 29 Taurus. And Jupiter was at 29 Taurus at the beginning of this series of executions that he was partially involved with. You know, this is, you know, he is a monster, or was a monster. You know, someone involved in this. Okay, he was a young man, but it doesn't take away from the fact that this is what he was involved with. This is how he built up his career. And these executions they hit now these executions certainly did hit Iran. I just wanted to compare these charts with midnight. We've got Pluto on a descendant. I think we can discount that because we don't really know where the ascendant was when the execution started. But if you look at Iran's chart, now assuming Iran, we've got the right time for the Islamic Republic of Iran, and let's get the Islamic Republic of Iran, and let's just see what's happening with the executions. So at the time of the executions, we can see that Pluto was at 946 Scorpio, and so Pluto was exactly on Iran's IC. This is assuming that Iran came into being at 3 p.m. on April the 1st, 1979. You've got Pluto exactly on the IC as these executions were happening. And these executions are connected, I think, with Jupiter, because if we take these executions and we look at the lunation before the execution, so if we look at the full moon just before the execution, let's just do that. The thing that kicked them all off. So there was a full moon on July the 14th, 1988. So I've set this full moon for Tehran. And so Jupiter was rising at the time of the full moon when these executions started. And you know, what is Jupiter about? Jupiter is supposedly, you know, it's the planet of good luck. But no, in this case, Jupiter was about I suppose, excess morality. Jupiter is an incredibly moral planet. Jupiter has clear ideas about the way things should be, and it can be quite brutal. So do not think that Jupiter is always a completely benefic influence. It is not. And there we have it with Jupiter rising at the time of these executions. Now, turning to the chart, going back to the chart of the president, there are a couple of things which I possibly have not mentioned about this chart, and that is the fact that he has got Pluto conjunct the North Node. Now, Ebertin says that Pluto conjunct the North Node, he's talking about the tragic destiny of a large group of people, or words to that effect. And again, this goes back to his association with the executions. And, you know, just all those people in 1988. That may be the Pluto conjunct the North Node. And we also have to think about what about his death? How does that fit together? So, okay, so here is the president's chart in the middle, and on the outer wheel, I've got the charts, the positions of the planets at the time of the accident. And what was exact at the time of that accident was, or fairly exact, was Mars conjunct the North Node. So Mars was conjunct the North Node at 1415 Aries, to 15th degree of Aries. And there is his Mars. The president's Mars was at 14 Cancer. So he had the Mars North Node conjunction was square his Mars. And that seems to be the thing that which killed him, which caused the accident. And because it's the North Node was involved, you know, that does suggest that there was a certain sense of fate there, that he died when he died. And it doesn't really matter why that accident happened, whether it was an accident, or we don't know whether it was an accident, whether it really was an accident, whether Israel did it, whether America did it, whether some internal faction in Iran did it, doesn't really matter. The point is, it was his fate. It happened when it happened. And looking at the Sun Jupiter, the Sun Jupiter conjunction, which happened at the time of the accident, this Sun Jupiter conjunction is semi-square Mars. So it's not exactly semi-square Mars, but it's actually pretty close. So Mars was semi-square the Sun. So the Sun at 2853 was moving towards a semi-square to Mars. Mars was his natal Mars, and of course he had Mars square his Mars. And Jupiter was at 2827 Taurus. And as we know, when the execution started, which he was involved with as a young man, he was on this committee of this death committee as Deputy Prosecutor General. It was a Jupiter return, and I kind of feel that it came round, and he finally had to accept responsibility for what he did, and there is perhaps a certain sense of justice there. So that's those were the transits, and I do think it's a Mars square Mars. And remember, Mars 14 Aries. I also wanted to consider solar arc directions. So solar arc directions is when you move every planet 1 degree for 1 year of life, and so we can do the solar arc directions for Ebrahim Raisi set for the day he died. So these are the solar arc directions. I am not saying that these solar arc directions are particularly impressive, but there is one thing that I do find really interesting. So here is his chart in the middle. And these are the solar arc directed positions. So just to remind you what solar arc directions do, you move every single planet in the horoscope 1 degree for every year of life. So he's 63 years old. He was 63 years old when he died. So you would move every single planet 63 degrees. Of course, we don't have a time of birth for him, so it's a sort of somewhat approximate, but this is roughly what it is. And the solar arc direction that catches my attention is Neptune. So his solar arc directed Neptune was opposition his Mars. So he was born with Neptune at 10 degrees 22 Scorpio. So when you click Neptune forward around 63, 64 degrees, it clicks forward to 1453 Capricorn. And you can see that his solar arc directed Neptune is opposition his Mars. I suppose you could say the helicopter, fog, bad weather, Neptune, Mars is the event. And we have to remember that Mars, which was being picked up by Neptune, was being squared by transiting Mars and by the transiting North Node. And we get a load of stuff at 14. When we do the solar arc, we get Neptune is at 14 Capricorn, Mercury is at 14 Aquarius, Jupiter is at 14 Pisces, and the North Node is at 14 Scorpio. So there's 14s all over the place. I don't know what the significance of that is, but so 14 was being picked up heavily. 40 stuff at 14 degrees was being picked up in a solar arc directed chart. And then we had this transiting Mars at 14 Aries, and that would square his Mars, and that's what killed him. And so those are some thoughts on the president of the former president of Iran. And I just do think that his death, because of Jupiter at 29 Taurus, it somehow relates back to what he did in 1988. He never had to take account for what he did. He never had to stand trial for it. But maybe fate has sort of worked it all out. And now that he's gone, he'll have to face the consequences somewhere else. So those are my thoughts on helicopter accident. I haven't really looked at it from a perspective of what's going to happen on Iran. I was trying to look at it more on a personal level in terms of the president. He wasn't the only person he died. There was the foreign minister who was in there. I haven't really sort of got time to look at the foreign minister's chart. Maybe another time. So yeah, it was personal, and obviously things are going to be going on in Iran. That is a big shock for the country. Although, from superficially, I didn't see a lot going on in the chart for April the 1st, 1979. But maybe I need to look at that chart in more detail. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I would be grateful if you were to like it. If you liked it and you're not subscribed, I would of course be very grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.